Hi everyone, Trina here, and I believe we are at 4.8, Origins of the Soul, and we just got done going through some pretty amazing near-death experiences, and I will continue with some of those, and where I was going to go next was called Landscapes of Light. So with that, many near-death experiencers never go beyond the stage of life review. And so, they only make it to the first bardo. Afterwards, the person is returned to his or her body to continue her life or his life on earth. However, some souls do go beyond this point, and they are allowed to travel further. Then the person returns with stories of dazzling landscapes of light. It seems that the deeper one penetrates these realms, the more substantial the vision becomes. Often, these radiant vistas seem to invoke a deep sense of recognition, as if the soul has been there many times before. Here is an account from a woman who returned after days in coma to tell of her experience. Her voice. I found myself in a place of such beauty and peace. It was timeless and spaceless. I was aware of delicate and shifting hues of color, with their accompanying rainbows of sound. Rainbows of sound. That is a beautiful description of how I see light. Rainbows of sound. Though there was no noise in this sound, I might have felt like the wind and bells were earthly. I became aware of other loving and caring beings hovering near me. Their presence was so welcoming and nurturing. They appeared formless in the way that I was accustomed to by now, to seeing things in this realm. I didn't know how to describe them. I was aware of some bearded male figures in white robes in a semicircle around me. The atmosphere became blended, as though made of translucent clouds. I watched as these clouds and their delicate shifting colors moved through and around us. Here is another account from a woman who died of an asthma attack and then returned. Her voice. When I came out of the tunnel, I was in a pearly, misty place. It was then that I thought I have died. At that instant, I was in a different level. Here, all was a soft gold, including me. All of life's fears and worries seemed so unimportant. So absolutely nothing to worry about. And all behind me stretched infinity, that all the people I'd ever known, knew now, and even would know, were there. All of us made out of this golden light. All made of the same stuff. And so truly, we are all one. I saw this like a liquid golden ocean out of which each person rose. It made of the ocean in their own individual shape, but all one originally. Basically, many loved ones were there and in endless joy. Dannon Brinkley also describes being pulled upward into the light to begin his journey through what he calls the Summerland. We began to move upward. I could hear a hum as my body began to vibrate at a higher rate of speed. We moved up from one level to the next, like an airplane climbing gently into the sky. We were surrounded by a shimmering mist, cool and thick, like a fog off the ocean. Around us, I could see energy fields that looked like prisms of light. Some of this energy flowed like great rivers, while some eddied like tiny streams. I even saw lakes and small pools of it. Up close, these were clearly fields of energy, but from a distance, they resembled rivers and lakes the way you would see them from an airplane. Through the mist, I could see the mountains of colors, of deep blue velvet. There were no sharp peaks and craggy slopes with jagged edges in the mountain range. The mountains were gentle, with rounded peaks and lush crevices that were a deeper blue. On the mountainside were lights. Through the mist, they looked like houses, turning their lights on at twilight. There were many such lights, and I could tell by the way they were swooped down and accelerated that they too were headed directly for them. Like wingless birds, we swept into a city of cathedrals. These cathedrals were made entirely of a crystalline substance that glowed with a light that shone powerfully from within. A similar description of this land of light comes from a woman whose heart stopped from an allergic reaction to an anesthetic. I found her voice. I found myself in a beautiful landscape. The grass is greener than anything I had seen on earth. It has a special light or glow. These colors are beyond description. The light is brighter than anything possible to imagine. And in this place, I saw people that I knew who had died. There were no words spoken, but it was as if I knew what they were thinking. And at the same time, I knew that they knew what I was thinking. I felt a peace that passed all understanding. I felt as if I wanted to stay there forever. But someone, I felt it was my guardian angel, said, "You have to go back, as you have not finished your term." The next near-death experience excerpts come from a woman mourning the death of her aunt when she suddenly dies herself. She gets to meet her aunt on the other side, giving her a powerful sense of closure. After returning to her body, she says, "I know that mountains and valleys and rivers and lakes and trees and flowers are more real there than here. And best of all, our loved ones live to love and welcome us home when we are called upon to change to a higher life." The following comes from Arthur, who was a staunch materialist and as a young man. This changed, however, on a road trip taken in 1932. Arthur's friend was driving the car when it suddenly skidded over a 3-foot-high ridge of oiled gravel outside of Los Angeles. The car flipped over in a series of violent somersaults, and Arthur and his friend were catapulted through the cloth roof of the car before it smashed into a ditch. The driver escaped without injury, but for a time Arthur found himself in the beauty of the far country. His voice. Gradually the earth scene faded away, and through it, the cloth roof looked a bright, new, beautiful world. Beautiful beyond imagination. For half a minute, I could see both worlds at once. Finally, when the earth was all gone, I stood in a glory that could only be heaven. In the background were 2 beautiful round-topped mountains, similar to the ones I'd seen in Japan. The tops were snow-capped, and the slopes were adorned with the foliage of indescribable beauty. The mountains appeared to be about 15 miles away, yet I could see individual flowers growing on their slopes. I estimated my vision to be about 100 times better than on Earth. To the left was a shimmering lake containing a different kind of water, a clear, golden, radiant, and alluring. It seemed to be alive. The whole landscape was carpeted with grass so vivid, clear, and green that it defies description. To the right was a grove of large, luxuriant trees, composed of the same clear material that seems to be making up everything. Then I noticed that the landscape was gradually becoming familiar. It seemed as if I had been here before. I remembered what was on the other side of the mountains. Then, with a sudden burst of joy, I realized that this was my real home. Back on Earth, I had been a visitor, a misfit, and a homesick stranger. With a sigh of relief, I said to myself, "Thank God I'm back again. This time, I'll stay." The Crystal City of Light. Some near-death experiencers report seeing a crystal city of light. This is one of the several magnificent cities at the center of the various levels of the astral plane. Jewish cosmology refers to this city as the city of the just, a realm where only the noblest, most righteous souls mingle and dwell. This is a place without hunger, war, or poverty, where we spend our days with those we love, together developing the highest qualities of souls. In this kingdom, we live in a state of perpetual light and joy, and we can move up in vibration into even higher levels of the astral plane. These realms are equivalent to many of our religious ideas about heaven, and these cities grow ever brighter the higher our vibration. Some souls are only allowed to see the crystal cities from a distance, like George. They glimpse at it, but are not allowed to enter. In the other cases, the soul is taken by their guides into the way station outside of the city's gates. There it is determined whether the soul has arrived prematurely, as George was, and if so, the person is sent back to Earth. Sometimes, however, though, the soul is allowed to enter the city and then return, as Dan and Brinkley did. These people are those who have been chosen to go back to Earth to share their experiences with others. Perhaps, not surprisingly, some near-death experiencers report seeing lustrous gates that lead to this crystal city, similar to the pearly gates in the old gospel hymns. These are 7 of the gates, just as there are 7 of the lower planes and 7 chakras within the body system. These gates are made of opalescent gems, and the buildings of the city are constructed of a translucent material that shimmers from within it. Near-death experiencers report that the streets seem to be made of precious metals like gold and silver. I saw gold. Here are 2 reports of those who have been there and returned. Their voice. And then I saw infinitely, far off, a far too distant to be visible with any kind of sight I knew of before. A city, a glowing, seamlessly endless city, bright enough to be seen over all the unimaginable distance. Between the brightness seemed to shine from the very walls and streets of this place, and from the beings which I could now discern moving about within it. In fact, the city and everything in it seemed to be made of light. The beauty of the countryside was incredible, but even it could not compare to the splendor of the city because of its glow. My guide next led me to a city. It was a city of light. It was similar to cities on Earth in that there were buildings and paths, but the buildings and paths appeared to be built out of materials which we would consider precious on Earth. They looked like marble and gold and silver and other bright materials, only they were different. The buildings and the streets seemed to have a sheen, a glow. The entire scene was of indescribable beauty. And when I remember this place that's similar to what they're describing, I can't explain it, but when your feet walk upon the paths of this place, the path knows you, and you know the path, and the flowers know you, and you know the flowers. You know everything intimately. It's so hard to put into words. It's literally so difficult. But this is what I remember and what I've seen as well. And it seems that there are so many others who have experienced the same. So, some travelers describe seeing magnificent houses in this realm. The size of a person's home depends on their generosity in their most recent life. Those who gave much to others have large homes, while those who have been in a more selfish life live in smaller homes. Here is one account from a woman whose deceased brother escorted her through the residential part of this city. Their voice: I was surprised to see that while many of these homes were spacious, others were very small. Some were barely larger than a small kitchen or a large bathroom. I couldn't imagine why anyone would want to live in a house so small, and I asked my brother about it. That was all the material they sent up, was his strange reply. What do you mean? I asked. That was all the good works they sent up, he replied, meaning the size of a house one gets in paradise is determined by the quantity and the quality of the good deeds performed upon the earth. Some near-death experiencers report seeing great halls of learning and gorgeous temples or cathedrals. Some visit vast libraries where the Akashic records are stored. Daryl, for example, a construction worker, found himself standing before a cathedral that looked a lot like St. Mark's. He reported that the building was made of translucent crystal blocks whose centers emanated a gold and silvery light. He knew immediately that this was a place of learning. Because of the information, it was pouring forth from the building itself. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and stop this one here, and we will resume with more of what happens when we cross over. Next, we will be getting into the libraries of learning. So we'll see you on the next one. Have a beautiful day, and we'll talk soon.